Hello, friends, and welcome back to another episode of the Juicebox Podcast.
Hello, my name is Tanya, and I live in the Columbus, Ohio area. I have been type 1 diabetic for 52 years, and I was diagnosed at age 4.
Please don't forget that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. I know this is going to sound crazy, but Blue Circle Health is a nonprofit that's offering a totally free virtual type 1 diabetes clinical care, education, and support program for adults 18 and up. You heard me right. Free. No strings attached. Just free. Currently, if you live in Florida, Maine, Vermont, Ohio, Delaware, Alabama, or Missouri, you're eligible for Blue Circle Health right now, but they are adding states quickly in 2025. So make sure to follow them at Blue Circle Health on social media and make yourself familiar with bluecirclehealth.org. Blue Circle Health is free. It is without cost. There are no strings attached. I am not hiding anything from you. bluecirclehealth.org. You know why they had to buy an ad? No one believes it's free. I'm having an on-body vibe alert. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by Eversense 365, the only one-year wear CGM. That's one insertion and one CGM a year. One CGM, 1 year. Not every 10 or 14 days. EversenseCGM.com/juicebox. Friends, Touched by Type 1's walk is coming up quickly on March 8th. That's a Saturday at Lake Eola Park in Orlando, Florida. Go now to Touched by Type 1 to sign up and register. It's completely free. You're going to have a wonderful time. touchedbytype1.org. Go to the programs tab. Click on Steps to a Cure.
Hello, my name is Tanya, and I live in the Columbus, Ohio area. I have been type 1 diabetic for 52 years, and I was diagnosed at age 4.
Age 4. So you're 56 now.
Correct.
Gotcha. I'm going to do your interview backwards from how I normally would. Do you mind? Do you listen to the show?
I do, and you can do it however you see fit,
Okay,
Scott.
Great. So I'm going to start with now instead of back then.
Okay.
I want to know how you're managing today.
That's a very good question, because the way that I manage today is so very different than how I first started out, obviously 52 years ago, and even where I was 30 years ago. So today I am completely 100% on board with state-of-the-art technology. I've got a Dexcom G7. I've got an Omnipod 5 insulin pump. Keep in mind that these are all really new to me. I started on the Dexcom about 3 years ago. So I had type 1 diabetes with no Dexcom, no constant glucose monitor ever whatsoever for the first 50 years. 3 years ago, I started on the Dexcom, and I just went on the Omnipod 5 back on May 23rd of this year. So it's only been a couple of months.
5 months.
And sure wish I would have done it a heck of a lot sooner.
Let me ask you first, after 5 decades of diabetes without technology like that, what made you get a CGM?
I was trying so very hard to control the diabetes on my own, which is the way I started off at age 4, doing everything on my own. We didn't have a juice box. We didn't even have Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation. We had nothing when I started out. So I was very used to doing it myself. I thought I was the only type 1 diabetic in the land. We had no social media, and I did not know anybody. It was not in my family. So I was all on my own. So my whole rest of my life, I'm a professional, went to college, used to doing things on my own. So I had the attitude, I can do this on my own. I don't need any tools. And then one day, about 3 years ago, my endocrinologist said to me, you work so hard at trying to keep your diabetes under control. She said, but you're really not doing a great job at it. She said, I think you need some tools in your toolbox. And I really respected this particular endocrinologist. Not all of them have I liked, but this particular one really resonated to me. And I thought, she's right. She's right. And on the outside of my file, I had looked when she stepped out of the room and it said out of control diabetic. And that killed me because I didn't feel like I deserved to have that title because I had always worked so hard to try to be in control, but it wasn't. And it was a 7.1, 7.2 A1C. And that honestly was as good as I could get it, not having any tools. So being on tools, this is now a couple months of being on the Omnipod. I now have a 6.1 A1C.
Okay, hold on a second. I want to take you back to the doctor's office. You're killing yourself trying to do this for years, forget years, decades. And to find out that that's how they think of you, really take me into that for a second. How does that make you feel to learn that all this effort has been put out over all these decades and you are, what was the quote?
Well, out of control diabetic was literally written on my file. And that stabbed like a knife. That was excruciatingly painful because I'm a control freak. I don't do drugs. I don't drink. I try to get exercise. I try to do everything the right way, try to be a good friend, try to be a good mom, try to be a good wife. Everything I try to do well. And I felt like, wow, the one thing that I can do for myself that I've been doing for 50 years at that point, it was seen as a failure.
What did you think your outcomes were? Did you feel successful or did you feel out of control?
I didn't feel like a huge success, but I was one of those people that I'm a control freak. And I really, really, really had concerns about the Omnipod getting hacked into, whether that be China or somebody else. I worried about things that were never going to happen that prevented me from being able to move forward with any technology. And then one day in that office, I said, that's it. That's it. I'm done. I'm done. Went home, called my mom, who's always been so instrumental in my life. And I told her, I said, today's the day. She said, for what? I said, I'm getting on board with the Omnipod. I called Omnipod that day. Doctor put in the prescription. As soon as it came in, we started right away on it. It was just making the decision after 50 years that this isn't working anymore. So I guess that would be my advice to people that have, dinosaurs like me, that, you can change. You should change. At least try it. I had a real good friend of mine, a best friend down in Miami who got diagnosed at type 1 at age 50. And she said, you can throw the thing off. She said, pull it off your skin, throw it in the trash if you want, but at least give it a try. It might make your life so much easier.
Right.
And that was the deciding factor.
Tanya, I have so many questions. You're open to talking about this, I imagine?
I am completely open, Scott.
Okay. What in the... I don't want to be pejorative. I was going to say what in the world, but tell me why you would think your insulin pump could be hacked by a rogue state. Like I really want you to think about that. Someone's sitting in China and they think, let's get Tanya. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by Eversense 365. And just as the name says, it lasts for a full year. Imagine for a second a CGM with just one sensor placement and one warm-up period every year. Imagine a sensor that has exceptional accuracy over that year and is actually the most accurate CGM in the low range that you can get. What if I told you that this sensor had no risk of falling off or being knocked off? That may seem too good to be true, but I'm not even done telling you about it yet. The Eversense 365 has essentially no compression lows. It features incredibly gentle adhesive for its transmitter. You can take the transmitter off when you don't want to wear your CGM and put it right back on without having to waste the sensor or go through another warm-up period. The app works with iOS and Android, even Apple Watch. You can manage your diabetes instead of your CGM with the Eversense 365. Learn more and get started today at eversensecgm.com/juicebox. 1 year, 1 CGM.
I know it sounds goofy. It's embarrassing to even admit it right now, but I really did. I really had fears that if somebody wanted to do something bad, oh, this is just fabulous. So the first time in my life, I'm not in control of my diabetes. I go to sleep and somebody could, not that they would, but they could potentially hack into that Omnipod. They were stupid fears. They were unfounded fears, but perception is reality.
Yeah.
So that was a perceived fear of mine to the point where I said, no, not doing it, not doing it.
It's awesome. I'm so like, I mean, so it's just one of those things that like, I don't know. In my wildest dreams, I understand that when every time something new comes out, I think it's important to realize that there's industries involved on every side of everything new. Everyone's trying to make money off of something, right? So you can get somebody that'll fearmonger anything because it makes something for them. So, insulin pumps are connected they have Bluetooth now. Well, you know what? They're going to get hacked. How'd you like to walk through an airport one day and have somebody kill you with your insulin pump remotely? I don't know. Have you ever heard of anything like that happening ever?
No, not ever. And the chance of me killing myself by not being in better control was more of a reality than worried about somebody hacking the Omnipod. So it's stupid. It was stupid. And that day I said, that's it. We're done.
Yeah.
Not doing this anymore.
Yeah, I'm having such a wonderful warm moment imagining Shijen just sitting around going, I'm going to get Tanya in Ohio today. We're going to give her a big bolus. It's going to be awesome. Wait till you see. That's how we're bringing down America. One Tanya at a time.
Exactly.
Listen, I know it's not, there are people listening like, it could happen. I'm like, okay, like I'm sure someone could hack into your technology and do all of that. I guess what I'm doing is I'm juxtaposing that against the actual harm you were doing to yourself with the way you were caring for yourself versus the unreal idea that this would end up happening to you.
100%.
Yeah. And so like 50 years into it, can you tell me average, what have your A1Cs been like? Because A1C is all they measured with in the beginning. So like, where were you with that?
Early on, starting out, I remember seeing an endocrinologist when I was probably 16, 17, 18, and the A1C was a 12.1. Mm-hmm. And the endocrinologist told me it was a woman, and she said, you're going to go blind with this. And I remember being furious at her. What do you know? What do you know? You don't live in my world. What do you know? Because I thought I could control everything. Really, I could control very little.
And you had no information about what you were doing either, right?
No. And at that age, we were told early on when I was 4, my mom told me that the attitude was run a little sweeter. That's what they would call it. Run a little sweeter. That's better than having lower blood sugar. Run it a little sweeter. That was in Cleveland. And then we moved down to Naples, Florida. People criticize Naples for its lack of schools might not be as good and medical facilities not as good. But Naples was actually the place that said, no, I think she needs to be on 2 shots a day. Because Cleveland, when I started off, said, nah, the endocrinologist there, 1 shot a day should be fine. It was not fine. It was horrible. I remember not feeling well and being crabby a lot, but not realizing that was due to the blood sugar because nobody ever tied that together.
Yeah. And I wonder, too, how many of your decisions moving forward as you got older are impacted by high blood sugars to begin with. Like even like that idea of like, they're coming for me, or, I can do this myself, or just being defiant in general. Higher blood sugars make people cloudy, right? And they change who you are. Like that's a real concern. Like it turns out like you're your own personal Xi Jinping. Like you were.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And not on purpose. Let's be honest, right? Like you're doing what you're told. Like Cleveland tells you 1 shot a day. Let's run a little sweeter. And then the next person says, no, let's do 2 a day. I'm looking at 12 A1Cs here. A little more insulin's not going to make this kid low all the time. But then that becomes the expectation, right?
Right.
And then when the times change, do you not go along with it? Like because what's the first, 50 years ago, are you beef and pork in the beginning?
We sure were.
Right. So like, then they moved to, I don't know, what happens next? Cloudy. And what was your next step?
Honestly, there have been so many, Scott, I can't even remember all of them in order, but we had NPH, we moved on to Traceba. We've been through them all.
So you've done MPH regular, beef, pork, you've done Humalog and Lantus. You've probably, and look at you with Traceba now, and into that. And so you're making all these steps through here. Why do you never make a leap? Like, I don't mean you, I don't mean why. I want to be clear. I'm not saying why didn't you? I'm saying, what do you think about your care and the way it was set up stopped you from leaping forward? Like, how come you didn't go from like a 5-speed to an electric car? You know what I mean? Like, how come you went from a 5-speed to an automatic to, I got air conditioning now. Oh, now I have power steering. Anti-lock brakes are coming. Like, how come you never leapt forward?
Well, I think I know what happened there. When I was 18, I left home, went down to Miami, Florida, went to college. I was a resident assistant, an RA there. I had a lot of responsibility. I was dealing with my diabetes the best I could. But in those days and ages, I didn't have to worry. Keep in mind, I didn't have to worry about lows. Yeah, I had to worry about highs.
Sure.
But I didn't have to worry about lows. In my entire 52 years, I have never been hospitalized. I've never been taken in an ambulance to the hospital for low or high blood sugar. Nothing. I felt pretty good. So why would I change what I thought wasn't broken?
Okay.
So I kept on with that. And then I got married, graduated from college. Everything went fine there. Got married, had 2 kids, and that was when everything came to a screeching halt with my care, because now it was no longer just me. I was bringing kids into the world. So that was when the blood sugar, the A1Cs, went from like a 8 and 9 down to a 6 point. But remember, I had no insulin pump. I had no Dexcom. So it was constant finger pricks all day, all night long to keep those babies safe.
How old were you when you got pregnant the first time?
I was 33 and 36 for the second one.
Okay. Wow, that's older.
Yeah, it was definitely.
I'm just going to say for back then, but I guess that is what I mean. Like, how old are your kids now?
21 and 23.
Oh my. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
21 and 23. I have an older kid than you.
Really?
Yeah. My son's going to be 25 in February.
Okay.
I'm just saying, because you're 4 years older than me, maybe 5 years older than me. And I had kids pretty young. So my point here is, I almost just like gasped a second ago, because I'm accustomed to 27-year-olds telling me, oh, I kind of pulled my head out of my ass when I decided to get married or had kids or something like that. Or even people in their mid-30s who look backwards. A person in their mid-50s, you said the same exact thing everybody else says. I realized like I had to take better care of myself because I had kids. It happens to everyone over and over and over again. What that means is that your explanation of, I thought I was doing okay, it's not completely accurate. You knew how things were going, but you didn't have an outside force to push you to really decide to figure it out and change it. Is that fair?
That's fair. And I also used a tool called an auto-injector by Owen Mumford. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. And that would deliver insulin. I would fill my syringe, put it right up to my jeans, didn't worry about alcohol, nothing. And I would just do my shot. I would do like 6, 7, 8, 9 shots a day from the moment I was pregnant. So call that age 30 till this day. That's how I operated. It was the Owen Mumford auto-injector, basically MDI, the entire duration until the pump, which was just this May 23rd.
You're saying that just having an auto-injector, that helped you to do more frequent, like not having to draw something up made it easier for you?
100%.
Okay. All right.
100%.
Yeah, I had never heard the name Owen Mumford along with it. I thought you were going to tell me something about Mumford and Sons for a second. I was like, this is going to be weird. But okay, so just having an auto-injector, so not having to pull out a needle and a vial and drawing it up made it easier for you. Plus, at that point, I'm guessing you're on faster acting insulin at that point as well.
Correct. But
Yeah.
I did have to use the insulin syringe. I remember being at work, corporation, where it wouldn't have looked real good to be pulling out my syringe and stuff in a sales environment. So I would do it like kind of down by my desk. I got real good at it. And I would pull the syringe out. I'd fill it with my Humalog and then just put that auto-injector. I would take that filled auto-injector in my purse to a lunch appointment, already pre-filled from the office, from under my desk. And I would go to that lunch meeting. Client never knew. I'd pull out that auto-injector, put it up next to my leg, my, whatever, hip, whatever. And I would hit the button and it would deliver the insulin. And that was at least how I was able to stay around a 7-point A1C, not being on an Omnipump and not having a Dexcom.
And prior to this auto injector, you would not have gotten up to excuse yourself did you even carry your insulin with you?
I did carry my insulin with me in my purse. I was one of those people that you did not need to know my business. This is my business. I didn't want anybody's sympathy.
Yeah.
And I'm still a lot like that. I still don't freely talk about it. I could probably help a whole lot of people if I could be a lot more open about it. But my attitude is I don't want your sympathy. So if I don't tell you, I don't get your sympathy, which is good.
So to avoid that, I don't know if we have time to dig into, Tanya, why you won't accept empathy from other people, but like avoiding telling them was doing you harm. That was still an acceptable trade-off.
Absolutely.
Do you know why?
I just think that I don't want anybody. I've got a great life, Scott. I've got a great husband, great parents, great brother, great kids, everything. I've got a great business. I own my own business, successful business. I had a great college. I have great friends. Everything's great.
But how does any of that stop if a business associate knows that you have diabetes?
Because I always felt like, especially when I worked with hotels, and it wasn't them doing it, it was just my perception, again, as reality, is that if somebody knew that I was dealing with this, they probably wouldn't want me to have to work the New Year's Eve event. They probably won't want me to have to work the Sunday brunch, running around for Easter brunch. And so then they won't ask me to be a part of the team. And that would have crushed me.
Yeah, you thought you would have got eliminated from their thinking if they thought you
were. And
I
did not want to be eliminated. I wanted to do everything they had to do. Never wanted to be treated differently.
But now that they know, has any of that happened?
Well, they don't all know.
Oh, okay. Even with the wearing a pump?
Oh, yeah, no.
Because I guess Omnipod allows you to hide it pretty well still.
Correct. And I wear it on my abdomen, so nobody needs to know.
Okay.
The only people that know are the very few people I can probably count on one hand, seriously, that know after 52 years.
Listen, I could sit here and make either argument for you. Like, tell people it'll surround yourself with people who understand and care about you and blah, blah, blah. And it'll be very good for you, mental health wise and physical health wise. I believe that. I can make that argument. I could talk about it for an hour. I could also tell you that a lot of people are assholes. And it's possible that them knowing about your diabetes is going to impact your life poorly. I could make that.
And
I
don't want to make any changes at this point. That's exactly right. It's the risk of that.
So in your mind, you're trading some A1C points, which probably don't seem terrible to you at an 8 because you've seen them at a 12. So an 8's still way better than 12.
Correct.
All right. So you're like, look, I could maybe get a 7, but what if I lose this contract? Then where am I? Right. What if I can't do this work anymore? Then I don't have a job. So I see the fear.
100%.
Yeah. Now, do you think if you were diagnosed 10 years ago, you would have felt that way?
Oh, no, I don't think I would have felt that way. I would like to believe that I would have early on said, oh, my gosh, why would I do MDI? That makes no sense at all. Just get on the Dexcom and get on the Omnipod. I remember, Scott, going to a meeting probably close to 20 years ago in Columbus, Ohio, at a hotel property, and they were talking about CGMs. It was a diabetes outreach board, and they would talk about these things called CGMs that were coming, and that you would hold it in your hand and it would tell you what your blood glucose score was. I was so mad when I left that meeting because I thought, what a cruel thing to tell a bunch of type 1 diabetics that this crazy tool is going to be out in the next 10, 20 years, whatever it is that they were working on this. This is a joke. This is not going to happen.
Oh, you thought it just couldn't possibly happen, that they would be able to.
Possibly.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
Do you think that's just a function of your, like when you grew up, your age, like your understanding of technology?
And we had no technology. Keep in mind, to test our blood sugar, we didn't even have a glucometer then.
Yeah.
We would take drops of urine in a test tube, add water and a pill. And if you were feeling optimistic that day, I'd tell my mom, no, ma, that's not orange. Orange was bad. No, that's not orange. That's closer to blue. That's closer to blue. No, T, it's closer. No, Mom, that's closer to blue. It's because you didn't want to think that you were out of control, but I was clearly out of control despite all the efforts my mom made to try to keep me in control.
Talk about the juxtaposition between the outcome and the effort. I don't want to put a word in your mouth, but what's the feeling you get from putting that much effort into something and seeing it not work out over and over again?
Frustration. I don't want to say hopelessness because that's not who I am. I'm a very optimistic person. I thought I was doing okay enough that I didn't have any bad consequences. The only bad consequences I had after age 4 to basically 19, not taking good care of myself. When I left home, having pizzas late at night, not doing insulin for it, I was the worst. I had retinopathy, diabetic retinopathy at age 21. As soon as I graduated from college, I was at my new job. I had to start diabetic retinopathy laser treatments at that time. And I went through that for about 18 months. That was when I made my 180-degree turnaround.
That's when you started
paying. That for me was life-changing.
Okay, so getting the laser treatments in your eyes took you from 12 A1C to where? Like more like in the 8s?
Yes, an 8.
Okay.
Yep.
And then it's not till you get pregnant that you hit the 6s.
Correct, which would have been around age 30.
Yeah, it's still another 10. It's still another 10 years or more.
Correct.
After I guess the lasers in the eyes, if that doesn't get your attention, I'm not sure.
Seriously, I'm no longer invincible. Yes, it can even get to me, was my thinking at that point. I'm like, okay, I get it.
But isn't it super interesting that you think you're invincible in the face of things that you have no control over, right? If you have these outcomes with your diabetes, these things are going to happen to you, but you're like, no, they won't. They're not going to happen. But in that same mind says, but what if another country decides to attack my technology?
Absolutely.
How come you didn't feel invincible there?
Lunacy. I mean, it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And I can laugh about it now, but I really remember feeling that way.
Let me tell you, Tanya, I think if you and I have this conversation while you feel that way, you're like, listen to me, buddy. I'm telling you right now, they're coming for us and they're going to get us through our insulin pumps.
Exactly. They're going to
just real quick.
One at a time.
Just real quickly. You don't think Jews control the weather, right?
I honestly don't know what to think anymore, Scott. My whole perception of reality is just changed so much. Like in my own world, it's like I trying to figure everything out. It's challenging.
So it's a lifetime of a way of thinking, and it actually bleeds into how you thought about your health.
100%.
It's interesting. So you were raised by parents who were like very conservative, like scared of things, like that kind of stuff?
Yes, I think that's a fair statement.
Okay.
Don't trust but verify. Very loving parents. My mom was my rock from the time I got type 1 diabetes.
Mm-hmm.
Love my father to death. He loves me immensely, but he could not deal with the diabetes. So my mom did everything on her own.
Right. Is it fair to say that like culturally very insulated, anybody that's not us is scary, that kind of thing?
Yeah. Yeah, that's absolutely fair statement.
And then it trickled into your diabetes somehow.
Yep.
Boy, that's interesting and very honest of you to share. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely.
The show is very non-political and stuff like that, so I don't really get into it that much. But I'm talking to you now. You're an adult. You're a sensible person. And to say that, like, there have been things that have been said so many times to me, I can't tell what's right and what's wrong. Because I'm assuming what you're telling me is that I've been told over and over again about how to be afraid. And at the same time, my common sense is telling me that is like not the case, but I can't reconcile the two things.
Correct.
Yeah. Boy, isn't that interesting?
Correct. And then I got to a point where I said, you know what, this clearly isn't working. And I was really seeing the black and white on the medical file that said out of control diabetic. And boy, was I mad. I was so mad, Scott, to be honest with you. That day I went home, I was furious. I was crying, and I'm not a overly emotional person. Usually I just, okay, whatever. I called the nurse at the office that day and said, I don't really appreciate that you guys wrote out of control diabetic on my folder. You clearly have no idea how hard I work to try to stay in control with no tools. Mm-hmm. And that was like part of the, wow, why am I doing this?
Yeah. The beginning of you sticking up for yourself.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. Okay. Hey, listen, I'm going to get past this part, but I just want to tell you that I know that Jewish people don't control the weather because I believe it wouldn't be humid in Florida if they did. So that's all I'm saying. I think if right, it's a fair statement. Now,
fair statement.
Yeah. Moving forward, you're now completely frustrated. You're going to fight more, but you're not fighting for yourself as much as you're fighting against them. Does that make sense to you in retrospect? Like, you were pissed about what they thought of you, not I want to do better for, like, you didn't say I don't want to be out of control. You were like, screw those people. Like, they're not right about me.
Absolutely. They don't know how hard I'm trying. But instead of saying, okay, the way it looks on the outside, look at the A1C, look at how hard you're trying to stay in control. I had an endocrinologist that called me one time. He called me at home at night. He said, listen, I'm worried about you. He said, the lows that you're getting at night, he said, that could kill you. He said, I'm worried about you.
How low were you?
It would be like 45 blood sugar. And I'd be talking to you the way I'm talking to you right now. That's a 45 blood sugar for me.
You wouldn't know the difference.
Not really.
No. Mm-mm. Okay. So what were you testing at that point? You knew you were 45?
Yes.
Okay. Did you feel low at all?
Sometimes there for a while, I would feel the lows. But what's interesting is when I went on the Omnipod and I went on the Dexcom, and everything is completely so much better now. The A1C is 6.1. Everything makes sense. But I don't really notice the blood sugars being low anymore. So I'm not really quite sure what to think there, but it's okay because I have a Dexcom.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I want to get to one point. So I'm going to kind of take you back into your 30s when you're having babies.
Sure.
Does the doctor say to you can't have kids at this A1C? If you're planning on getting pregnant, lower it? Or were you pregnant and they said, oh, you're going to have trouble if you don't bring down your A1C?
Yes, I saw a wonderful doctor in Columbus, very well-known diabetic doctor, maternal medicine, and he explained it loud and clear, and we got along wonderfully. He's still a good friend to me to this day and age. I reach out to him periodically, and he said, you've got to get this A1C, he said, down. He said, we got to keep it down at like a 6. And so I immediately, when I found out I was pregnant, immediately went down, took that thing down to a 6 because it was so not about me anymore. It was my concern of hurting them. Not that I necessarily didn't want to be here to help my kids grow up, but my main concern was giving them heart damage or, doing something that could hurt them.
Yeah. So how did you accomplish that? How did you just say, oh, okay, I'll drop my A1C 2 points? Like, what did you do to physically accomplish that?
Constantly check the blood sugar like 12 times a day, literally, with the little pin prick on the finger and my little glucometer. And every time it would go to a certain number, it would be like a 140, boom, do a shot, boom, do a shot with my autojector, because the autojector enabled me to be able to do that. And I was working full time at the time. It was a busy life, but it was a good life. It was a good life. I didn't mind doing what I needed to do to try to give them every opportunity to be healthy.
Yeah. You're avoiding a lot by having a lower A1C during pregnancy, like birth defects, hypoglycemia after birth for the baby, preterm, like, birth, getting, having an early delivery, stillbirth, jaundice, like a lot of things, fetal birth weight. I've even heard people talk about the babies can have a higher likelihood of like type 2 diabetes as adults. But did that effort teach you, oh, I don't have enough insulin during the day?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you left the pregnancy with that knowledge. Did you keep doing it after that? Or did you go, well, there's no baby in there now, so don't worry about it anymore?
No, I did, because I needed to be alive for them. And then 2 years later, my son was born. And so by then it was, okay, 9 months doing it for my son. And then my daughter was born after that. Keep doing it. And then, I would get involved with JDRF and heard more about the importance of staying in tight control. And so it was really age 30 when everything changed. That was my 180-degree turnaround. Even in the 20s also, after the retinopathy, but really it was the pregnancies that kicked things into the 6-point A1C.
And hearing from people, it's interesting. You said something that somebody just said to me 2 weeks ago, a gentleman who's 76 years old and has had diabetes for 5 decades. Before JDRF, the library is the only place I could get information about diabetes. And then JDRF came and they started handing out pamphlets and saying things over and over again. And you just said, until somebody started saying over and over, keep a tighter control. It really is that simple, I think. Like just repeating simple ideas to people until they hear them. And then it's not so much that you learn you need it. It's almost like it just becomes reality. Like it's just a thing you understand. You don't have to think about it any longer. If I use more insulin matching with my higher blood sugars, it'll keep my blood sugars down. I'll have a lower A1C. I'll have better health, et cetera, and so on. It is just that. It's just getting good information from somebody.
100%.
Yeah. How about that?
And the Omnipod, I mean, that just, now I'll go to bed. And if it's 141, I'll hit the auto correction and maybe we need a little bit there. And then it'll give me, 0.1, 0.2, whatever it gives me. Mm-hmm. And then I'll go to sleep and I'll wake up and it'll be a beautiful 90 every morning.
Yeah.
So it's completely different now than it was earlier in life. Thank God.
Yeah, no kidding. You don't have any trouble managing the technology because you were kind of a Luddite for a while, like you weren't using any technology at all. You didn't have any trouble learning it and adapting yourself to it?
Not really. The only challenge I would say, and I probably need to reach back out to the nurse educator, is to try to figure out, like, it's always 4 a.m. That's when it'll hit like 140. And so a lot of times still at 4 a.m., I wake, it wakes me up, the Dexcom, and I'll do that auto correction. And that little auto correction will give its little magical, mystical amount, which will take it back down. So I wake up and it's 90. So something happens that little, I can't remember what they call that period of the morning, but something happens to me at 4 a.m. So I'd like to figure out now, that's the next step here, is what is that? Why is it happening? And what do I need to do? Do I need to go in manual mode? Do I need to go in some different mode through the night to try to beat that?
What's your target set at in Omnipod 5?
It's the lowest one.
It is the lowest. Okay. Okay. 110, 112, something like that in there.
Yeah. I think it's 110. 110.
So you're at your lowest target, but you rise probably from like 3 to 4. At 4, you're hitting this 140. Yeah. You get woken up by your alarm. And then there's an amount that the Omnipod 5 is like suggesting, but not bolusing. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. And you put that in.
And then I'll bolus it based on its amount. And it's right every time, 100%. I do what it says. I hit the bolus button. I wake up, it's 90. that next morning.
Now, your level of effort today as a person with type 1 versus your level of effort the years prior to you getting a CGM, are you working harder now or less hard?
No, that's the pathetic part, Scott. I am definitely not working harder. I am working smarter.
Mm-hmm.
No, I put so much effort in before, but it didn't show.
Yeah, then the frustration comes from that.
Yes.
How about like your mental space? Like how much are you paying attention to diabetes now versus before?
I pay attention to it quite a bit. I mean, I've been very fortunate. The retinopathy was the only complication I had, and that was when I was 21 and 22 years old. That's now completely quiescent. There's nothing happening there. I see the retinal doctor every year, podiatrist, no issues with neuropathy, nothing. Mm-hmm. So I've been very blessed to have been out of control for all those years, that it didn't hit me a lot harder than it did. And I'm grateful. I'm appreciative. I'm grateful, but I'm not going to stop the care at this point.
Yeah, no kidding. Are the gaps of time in between when you touch diabetes during the day, are they bigger, or are you just programmed at this point to keep looking?
I'm pretty programmed just out of curiosity. Like it'll be like I work from home. I negotiate contracts between companies and hotels. Mm-hmm. So I've got a home office, and I will look at the phone every now and then, just like, wow, the Dexcom's been so quiet. Let me make sure. Because remember, I'm one of those people that has to trust but verify.
Yeah.
So I have to make sure, is the Dexcom working? Is it working? And I'll pick up the phone. It'll be like 114 right now, 114 blood sugar. So it's all good. So there's a lot less dealing with diabetes these days than even a couple months ago before the CGM and the Omnipod. No question.
I'm going to ask a personal question.
Yeah.
Menopause?
I had that about 4 years ago. So through that.
Okay. And did diabetes get easier after menopause ended?
I never really noticed. I didn't have any big deal. It was no big deal. Okay. I was like, wow, yeah, it's been a while. Okay. I guess I was lucky in that way where it never really affected me for the better or for the worse, to be honest.
Okay. Do you have other autoimmune issues besides type 1?
I do not.
I thought you were going to say no.
Nope.
And I have no reason to think this, but I thought you were going to say no because even with your poor control for those decades, you don't seem to have any complications at the moment. And then my follow-up question to that was going to be, do you see a cardiologist? Is somebody mapping your cardiovascular system to make sure that you're not having problems that you're not aware of yet?
No. And I have wondered about that for years, but I have the mentality where if the endocrinologist thinks that there's a reason why I should see a cardiologist, she'll tell me. So I'm not going to ask her, do you think I should see a cardiologist? I'm going to let her tell me. And if she says that, then I'll go see one. But until she says that, probably not going to do that because I don't want to look for trouble. How's that?
Well, that's not how that works, Tanya, though.
I know. That is the truth, though, Scott. That's how I feel. But no, I have not. I've seen a foot doctor, I've seen everybody else, but have not seen a cardiologist.
Well, I would tell you that with high A1Cs for that long, I would want somebody to look and just make sure I don't have blockages somewhere that just haven't caused me an emergent situation yet. That's all, because higher blood sugars, causing those little holes to rub in arteries and veins and whatnot, and then they patch back over and they get thinner and thinner. Like, wouldn't it be great to see? Great. I honestly think this would be great. Wouldn't it be great to go to a cardiologist and have them tell you, hey, you've got like a 30% blockage here, or, I see an 80% here. We'll just clean those out real quick for you.
Yeah, no, you're right. And Scott, in all honesty, it is your show, Juicebox. The first time that I heard about the blood vessels and blah, blah, blah with diabetes, it was on your show where you actually explained about the blood sugar rubbing against the arteries and the scar tissue and that. I had never heard that before. And that was about a month ago. I heard that.
Yeah. How did you find the podcast?
I was reading a book and I can't honestly remember the name of the book. And they had mentioned other sources.
If it was in a book, it was Think Like a Pancreas. I think that's the only book anybody's ever put my podcast
think you're right.
into. Yeah,
I think you're right. And also, one of my doctors had told me, hey, you should turn on Juicebox. And I was not aware of who you were, but boy, I sure wish I had found you a lot earlier in life.
I don't want to scare you, Tanya, but I'm using your podcast app to take control of your phone. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, no. Oh, that's all right. It's time. It's good.
You know, when people say, I can't believe it, there was an episode about this topic and I was just thinking about it, it's because I can listen to you through your podcast app. No, I'm just teasing.
That's right. Through the Alexa, through the phone, right? All the sources.
But I think it's interesting when people your age find like podcasting or like, you know what I mean? Like, do you ever have like a 70-year-old tell you, like, I saw this on YouTube and you're like, get out of here. Really? Did you?
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's awesome. But okay, so a doctor told you about it and you saw it in Gary's book. And I want to say, I don't know Gary. I think I've spoken to him once in my whole life, but I'm assuming Jenny's the reason that my podcast is in Gary's book. So like, you know, Jenny works for Gary. So
yes.
I mean, it's incredibly interesting that you could live 5 decades into your 50s and a doctor has never said to you, hey, you know what, Tanya, you've had A1Cs from 12 to 8 for decades at a time. Why don't we just, you know, inject a little dye in there, look around, make sure that all your arteries and thoroughfares are nice and clear. You know, now you've heard it explained, but if you drop over dead 10 years from now from a heart attack, that's going to be a heart attack. They're going to say it's a complication of type 1 diabetes, and they're probably going to be right. You know, like, so I say stay ahead. You work this hard to get here. You know what I mean? Like, I'd turn some of that like obstinance onto like staying ahead of problems. Because now you're doing terrific now.
Yeah, no, that's a fair statement. Yeah. That's a good point.
What's your A1C now?
6.1.
Good for you.
See, I have to get it like Arden, though, Scott.
Oh, well, listen, Arden's in college right now. So Arden, you're doing better than Arden right now. It's funny because that's even another thing gets made a big deal of sometimes by people. Like they're like, oh, you know, Scott pushes that his daughter's A1C is lower. And people don't understand how this works. Like one time I did a talk somewhere and they asked you, like, we have to introduce you. How do you want to be introduced? You know, like, what are we going to say to get people interested into coming into this room? And I used to say, well, like, just tell them I'm going to explain how insulin works. And I had a person tell me, like, that is not interesting. No one's going to care about that. And like, they don't know why they care about the timing of insulin. So telling them that's not going to bring them in. And I said, oh, well, just tell them. I mean, I said one day, well, my daughter's A1C is between 5.2 and 6.2 for like, you know, however many years it was at that time. And she doesn't have a prescribed eating style. Like, it's not like she's not eating a specific way to get that.
Right.
Maybe that'll like get people's attention. And, you know, like, I don't care if I don't honestly care what people's A1Cs are. Like, I want your time and range to be tight. You know, you're going to start hearing in the next year, I think, Tanya, big entities like ADA and JDRF start talking about total time in tight range. Now they've got people thinking 70 to 180, which, by the way, in fairness, I was saying a long time before they were, but that's fair. And now I think they're going to start talking about 70 to 140 because of what we spoke about earlier. They are trying to get these messages into people's minds so that it's just what they come to expect. Because I think they realized that when they told people diabetes, nothing you can do about it, right? It is what it is. That's what people thought. It is what it is. There's nothing we can do about it. Then they told them, hey, listen, keep it between 70 and 180. And people are like, all right, I'll shoot for that. And now they're going to tell them 70 and 140 and try to get them, because they have all these other tools, to shoot for that. I think that's awesome. But I also think if your A1C's, I honestly don't even know what Arden's is right now. Like, so she's in college. She just switched universities. It was not easy. She's in her first couple of months at this new place. And she's now refiguring out the food and how to bolus for it and her activity levels. I wouldn't be surprised if Arden's A1C is like 6.7 right now. Like, you know what I mean? But she's also a 20-year-old kid with a 6.7 A1C who I've only seen fight off a couple of lows in the last 2 months. Awesome. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. 100%.
Absolutely awesome. So a lot is about where you are in your life as well. The problem becomes is that if you start talking about it like, oh, it just happens to you, then people end up with, oh, I've got a 250 blood sugar. I was 300 after I ate. It just there's nothing I can do about it. Like, I just talk about it the way I talk about it to give people the expectation that says, you know what? I think you can do this. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think you could get a 6A1C if you just understood how insulin worked a little better, put it in at the right times, you know, didn't overtreat lows, didn't overtreat highs, that kind of like those small things, which you're now doing day to day. And look at you, you're doing amazing.
Well, and you made a great point to me. I just listened to you the other night and you said, I can't remember which number it was, but you said, you know, why can't you, if you're at a 6.1, you know, why can't you try for a 5.9? And that really resonated. And I thought, you know what, that's a darn good point. I'm at a 6.1. Why can't I get a 5.9? What does that mean? Just watch when it hits 120 instead of reacting at 140. You know, react when it's 120. So now it's become like this little bit of a personal challenge to try to stay so on top of it without making myself crazy.
Yeah.
But I work from home. So that's a big help to me to be able to, you know,
because you can
work
stop
from home, and it's not too much. It's not excruciating to be able to do that. But I love that piece of advice. Why can't you get to a 5.9?
I mean, if that's what you want, then there it is. Because I think the simple truth is that your blood sugar rising, let's say it's going to rise to 150 eventually, and you have an alarm set at 140. So there's an amount of insulin at 140 on a rise that's eventually going to get to 150 that will slow it down and bring it back to 90. But in that same rise, a rise that's going to go to 150, if you jump in 20 points sooner, which could end up being 20, 30 minutes earlier, the amount of insulin it'll take to negate that rise and go back to 90 is less than the amount it will take when you're at 140.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so if you've got the time and the bandwidth, and like you said, I don't want anybody making themselves bananas about all this, right? But like, if you have that, then great. Like, then you use less insulin. You never get to 150 to come to 90. Maybe it goes to maybe 140 is the peak, or maybe you got ahead of it so much that at 120, it just kind of leveled out and came back down again. Like, and at the very least, you do that a few times and you understand how it works. You understand the insulin timing and the amount and how it impacts things. And now you can make a better decision moving forward.
And the pre-meal bolus and all of that stuff. It's unbelievable how much that will change that A1C.
Oh my God. I just had somebody say the other day to me about, it was like a review somebody left for me. And it was about like, you know, an older person who had diabetes for a while who said, you know, I can't believe, you know, no one in 20, 40 years ever said to me, pre-bolus your meals. And now I'm doing that. I'm having all the success because of this podcast. And I think when I hear it, I think, God, what a simple thing. It literally feels like they put you into a car and like never said to you, like, hey, the one on the left stops it, the one on the right makes it go faster.
That is exactly. Nobody ever told me that. I had not heard, Scott, I never even heard the term MDI until your podcast.
I don't understand how that's possible that on day one, people don't start telling you, because now, again, we've gone over this good information. I don't see how on day one, they don't start telling you like, oh, look, a lot of this is timing and amount of insulin, right? It's about using the right amount of insulin at the right time. That's a big idea, but we're going to cover this over the next months to year until it makes sense to you. Because look at you. How do you make it 5 decades and not anyone ever tell you that it matters where you put the insulin in? It's insane.
It's absolutely insane.
We're getting up on an hour. I just want to see if we've missed anything that you wanted to talk about. I don't want to get too deep into this and you say, oh, I wish we would have talked about this too. How are you feeling about the conversation?
It's great. It's great. And anything you want to discuss, I'm an open book.
You certainly are. I really do appreciate it. I tell people all the time that, you know, it's these kinds of conversations, a conversation where a person's willing to say something that they know someone's going to hear and think, what's wrong with that person? You know what I mean? Like, how could they think that or something? But those are the ways I think you open everyone's mind up to the idea that we all are not fed the same information about life or diabetes or anything else. And when we just put together what we've been told and we do our best with it, and then later, you know, you have this outcome that's, you know, off-centered to a point where people are like, what are you doing here? Like, how did you get your A1C to 12? How do you not know that that's not true? Like this kind of stuff. And that's how it's not ignorance. And it's not like, sometimes it's not just willfully ignoring something. Sometimes somebody just set you on a path, and now that's the path you're on.
That's exactly it. And you just become a creature of habit. You just keep doing the same thing over and over and over until eventually, hopefully you come to the point where you realize, you know what, so many people are using this. And it was probably my best friend down in Miami on the Omnipod and the Dexcom. I was on the Dexcom, but not the Omnipod. And she said, I think you really need to try this. She said, if you don't like it, and it was the visual she gave me. She said, you take the thing, you throw it off and you throw it in the trash. Mm-hmm. And she said, but at least give it a try. She said, I can't tell you how much easier this is making my life. And so that was somebody I really trusted and respected. And so when she did that, I'm like, okay, all right. Okay, I am going to do it.
I can do that now.
So all that came together.
And what's it hurt to try is generally speaking a good way to think.
That's the point.
Yeah. It really doesn't hurt you to give it a shot. And then the only thing you can have is a good experience or a bad experience. And like you said, you're not stuck with it. Just throw it away or say, wow, I can't believe this. I mean, listen, my daughter's 20. She's been wearing an Omnipod since she was 4. So go back 16 years in your life and imagine if you had a pump 16 years ago.
Oh, 100%. You talk about hindsight, wishing you had done things differently. I wish I would have.
Yeah.
No question.
Does it make you sad to think about it like that? Or are you not wired like that?
I'm not really wired like that. I mean, yes, I have regrets that I wish I would have, but I think everybody has to do things when they're ready to do things. Everyone can tell you to do something. You should. But until you're ready to do it, it's like what I used to always say about diabetes. If I would meet somebody that was newly diagnosed, and if they were one of the people I chose to share my story with or not, I would tell them that, what works for me may not work for you. You have to find your own way. For some people, it's the auto-injector. For other people, it's multiple daily injections. For somebody else, it's the pump. For me right now, it's not the pump. It's the auto-injector, but you might really enjoy the pump. You should at least be open-minded, but you have to figure things out in your own way for yourself in your own time. And just don't be afraid of change. I think that would be the advice I would give to somebody that's had diabetes 25 years plus that said, no, I'm not ever getting a pump. Mm-hmm. Just be open-minded. Don't be so fearful.
Yeah. Wonder what your Mumford story will be. Seriously, like, you've got the Owen Mumford, auto injector. Like, what are other people's stories? What's going to take them and make them go, oh my God, what have I not been paying attention to? So you haven't been listening that long, Tanya, but years ago, I would have used this phrase a lot. I would have said, you don't want to be the last person to look up and go, how's everyone doing it now? You know what I mean? Like,
exactly.
Yeah, like, wait, what? I got this. No, hold on. I got my beef and pork over here. What do you got?
Exactly.
That's what you don't want.
But what's pathetic, Scott, is my mom was actually the Dr. Benjamin Spock's, the baby doctor of all time. She was his personal secretary. So we always had really good access to very good endocrinologists in the Cleveland area when we lived there at the time and stuff. So we were probably a little better off as far as medical availability than a lot of other people, even in 1972 when I was diagnosed. But that didn't even change a whole lot of things. Nobody really knew anything about diabetes back then.
Boy, it's interesting, isn't it? Because not everybody would agree in hindsight with some of the things Dr. Spock said. But I do think that it makes the point. People are going to have new ideas. They're going to say them out loud. You should listen to them and see which ones make sense to you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
At least hear them out. Yeah. Right.
Well, I mean, because we get so stuck in this is how we do it because this is how it's been done. And then that keeps happening over and over, day after day, into year after year, to decade after decade. And before you know it, you've got doctors telling you things that no one's thought for 10 years if they in a modern world. And listen, everything somebody says that's new isn't right. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure I've said stuff on here where I'm like, you know what I'm seeing? I'm seeing this. And that 3 years from now, you're going to look back and go, that wasn't right.
Yeah.
At least we're talking about it and pushing envelopes to try to find new bleeding edges. It just makes sense to me to just keep trying to grow. Because if not, we're all stuck in the same place, 200 years ago, and the first thought anybody ever had. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't want us to be putting leeches on people to get rid of like bad spirits, or whatever.
Yeah.
And the reason I brought it up earlier, and the reason I've brought it up throughout the podcast, is because my very best friend is not alive anymore because of type 1 diabetes.
Okay.
But moreover, he's not alive anymore because of the direction he got and the fact that he never looked past that initial direction. That's really what got Mike. He was diagnosed in the late 80s, and nobody really knew what they were doing, and he didn't know what he was doing. And now I look back as the person I am today, I can see it, always like urinating all the time, grumpy, but then all of a sudden dizzy. Like, his blood sugars were probably pinging up and down all day long. He didn't know what was going on. But as technology got better through the 90s and into the 2000s, he just didn't come along with it. And by the time he did, they just basically handed him Novolog, and they were like, here, just this new fast-acting insulin is going to work great. Imagine that. Imagine that, 10 years ago, my friend was given Novolog for the first time.
Wow.
After being diagnosed in 89.
Wow.
Now he's crashing himself. He had a car accident because he gave him, he's shooting his Novolog the way he was shooting his regular and his MPH and stuff like that. So he didn't know. He didn't know any better. And then, he's having problems. He's having seizures. He's falling out of bed. He's breaking his arm. He's having all these problems. No one comes in to help him with it. And when he told me about it and I tried to help, he was so resistant to being helped. And I recognize a lot of your statements and how he felt, I think. Like, you don't need to tell me how to do this. I know what I'm doing. I don't need help, like that kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden, boom, hey, Scott, I got to go on dialysis.
Oh, boy.
And then that started. And then it was, this isn't going well. And, and dialysis is not fun, for anybody who wonders. And really difficult on him. He couldn't work anymore. Now he's a guy in his late 40s, just he can't go to his job. And now his life is sitting around going to dialysis.
Oh, that's awful.
Then he and his wife are sitting in their living room one day, Tanya, and they're talking about what to get for dinner. And they make a decision, and he stands up to go to the kitchen and just falls right over and has a heart attack.
Really?
Just like that. And sadly, the paramedics saved him that day, but he died a few days later.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. And so but he had the problems that I described to you. Like his, it wasn't just his kidneys that were being assaulted by that extra glucose. It was also arteries around his heart that, and then the dialysis is hard on your heart as well. So now it adds extra pressure.
I've heard that.
Yeah. So I just don't want that. That is a needless thing to happen to people in a modern time.
Agree.
Yeah. So
agree. And they just don't be afraid to try. I mean, I hope somebody takes that away from this podcast today. Just don't be afraid to try, and maybe don't wait 50 years to do it.
Yeah. 50. Boy, that's a long ass time, Tanya.
It is. That's crazy. It's almost humorous.
Yeah, well, because it's humorous in hindsight, because you can look back and look over all those years and think, like, what was I waiting for? Right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And instead of being mad walking out of the JDRF meeting where they're talking about this wonderful device called a CGM that's coming on the market, maybe don't get mad. Maybe, follow it. Maybe see when it's coming out. Ask your endocrinologist, hey, how can I get that when that comes out? I would have done things very differently if I was, if I could turn back the hands of time, but you can't. So you just have to move forward and use the tools you have, because they are really pretty amazing.
You have a terrific attitude about it. And that's awesome. I appreciate you sharing that. But also, I said it before, but if your blood sugar's 300 all the time, and then someone comes up to you and says, hey, we really think there's going to be this crazy, technology coming, especially back then at a time when technology wasn't something that was happening a lot.
Right.
Where it meant that you got an AM and an FM radio in your car.
Right.
When that's happening, like, would you have been more open to it if your blood sugar was 95 and stable? Like, do you think we'll never know, is my point.
Yeah, never going to know.
Yeah.
I just thought it was like, they're raising all these hopes and all these people, and, what a stupid thing to do, was my thinking at that point.
Somewhere deep down in the middle of your brain and the bottom of your heart, you were hopeless about diabetes.
Oh, I think that's a fair statement.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And however long I have it, I remember when I was diagnosed, my mom told me that, she said, well, oh my gosh, how long, what would her life expectancy be with this type 1? And at that point, Scott, in 1972, they told my mom 40.
Yeah.
And so my mom thought 40, and she said, so she can never have kids, nothing. And the doctor said she may not want to have kids. And my mom said, well, what if she does want to have kids? And nobody really had the answers then.
Mm-hmm.
And I was very blessed. I took darn good care of myself during those 2 pregnancies. And I was very lucky. I had no events. I had 2 C-sections. Both kids were born healthy, beautiful, no problems whatsoever. Both had to be in the NICU for like 1 day because, diabetic mother. So they automatically put them in the NICU. But other than that, there was no reason for them to have to be in the NICU.
Mm-hmm.
And we all came out and lived a beautiful life.
I often think about a person on the podcast who was diagnosed a long time ago who said that they were diagnosed a female in college, and the direction they got from the doctor was to drop out of college because they might as well go live their life because they're not going to live very long. And,
oh, God.
And the doctor also told her that probably no men would want her. Like, can you imagine like being in college and someone saying to you, listen, this education you're looking for, I'd skip it if I was you because you're not going to live that long anyway. And don't get your hopes up about marrying because I don't know what boys are going to want you.
Scott, I'll tell you what, that's probably a topic for another day, but I had a boyfriend in high school who was a wonderful person. His mom, not so wonderful. And she told him when he told her that I had type 1 diabetes, she said, well, no wonder she has her claws in you. And he told that to me. And I will tell you what, that messed me up for decades. I had such a low self-esteem that, I did date underneath me for a while because I believed what she had said that day. It cut like a razor blade. And it wasn't until I got older and I got out of college and I got my job with hotels and I met and married the most wonderful electrical engineer, and life is stellar. But man, people can do some pretty damaging things if they tell you that earlier in your life.
A couple of words really cut the wrong way. Yeah, you can't get rid of them.
For decades. The
idea was you liked this boy a lot, but you didn't really like him. You just wanted to hold on to him because you had problems and you were going to need his help.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. And then you started thinking, like, is that how people are going to see me?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, exactly. And I dated underneath me for a while because I'm like, oh my gosh, when he and I broke up, oh my gosh. And I went to college and, dated other people and nobody was really on the level that I should have been looking for. Mm-hmm. They all had issues, and who wants to marry an issue anyway? So you date people underneath you, and then you don't have to worry about that becoming a reality where maybe the good person won't want to date you, let alone marry you.
Right.
So I didn't have to put myself in that position.
You thought, well, I'm f***ed up. I'll go find other people that are too. Yeah, and that way you won't be able to argue with my problems. How about that?
Right.
Oh, I'm sorry. No.
Right. But it's all good now. I mean, hopefully we grow up, we learn things. There's a lot of bad, stupid advice given to us over the years. And that was just one piece of it.
Okay. Well, Tanya, I'm going to thank you. This has really been wonderful. And like I said, I appreciate you being so open and coming on here. And I'm super excited for you that you've made that leap from just like, oh, this is good enough to, I wonder how good this could be. Really, really wonderful, especially at your age. And I know that's hard to hear because listen, people talk, I'm 53 and sometimes people say stuff like that to me and I'm like, oh, I'm not that old, but I'm not saying you're like, at the end, but I am telling you, but at this age, to make a big adjustment like this in thinking, technology, looking inward at yourself, like all the things that you've done are all exemplary. I think it's wonderful. I hope somebody's told you they're proud of you.
Yeah. Thank you, Scott. I appreciate that. And I appreciate that everything you do and you've done and are still doing to try to educate the community, because there's a lot of us out there that really need some guidance.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I appreciate you saying that. Hold on one second for me, okay?
Okay.
I'd like to thank the Eversense 365 for sponsoring this episode of the Juicebox Podcast, and remind you that if you want the only sensor that gets inserted once a year and not every 14 days, you want the Eversense CGM. EversenseCGM.com/juicebox. 1 year, 1 CGM. Guys, you want to go for a walk with Touched by Type 1 in Orlando? You can do it, and you can have a great time, meet a lot of wonderful people. Touchedbytype1.org. Go to the Programs tab, click on Steps to a Cure, and get yourself registered right now for the beautiful walk that's coming up on March 8th in Orlando. Touchedbytype1.org. Hey, thanks for listening all the way to the end. I really appreciate your loyalty and listenership. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. Are you starting to see patterns, but you can't quite make sense of them? You're like, oh, if I bolus here, this happens, but I don't know what to do. Should I put in a little less, a little more? If you're starting to have those thoughts, if you're starting to think, this isn't going the way the doctor said it would, I think I see something here, but I can't be sure. Once you're having those thoughts, you're ready for the Diabetes Pro Tip series from the Juicebox Podcast. It begins at episode 1000. You can also find it at juiceboxpodcast.com up in the menu, and you can find a list in the private Facebook group. Just check right under the featured tab at the top. It'll show you lists of a ton of stuff, including the Pro Tip series, which runs from episode 1000 to 1025. The episode you just heard was professionally edited by Wrong Way Recording. wrongwayrecording.com.